You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Hi, everybody. I'm Doc Martin, Maximum Medicine, and my guest today is Richard Grossinger. He is an ecological anthropologist from way back, but his biggest talent, as I see it in this world, is he is a book publisher, having founded North Atlantic Books, but he's also a curator of books in many different traditions of healing. And that includes the explorations in alternative medicine and consciousness in the indigenous. And he knows what goes on behind the scenes, as I like to dive into in the world of healing. And he wrote a book. Richard, when did you first write Homeopathy?
Well, I first wrote, Homeopathy was originally 4 chapters in Planet Medicine, which was published, I guess I wrote it in the mid-1970s, and it was published, I think in 1979 by Doubleday, and then republished innumerable times after that. And at a certain point, I pulled the Homeopathy out of Planet Medicine and made it its own book. And so it went from being called Homeopathy, an introduction for beginners and skeptics, to Homeopathy, the Great Riddle. And then most recently, the most thorough revision is Homeopathy as Energy Medicine. And let me add one kind of footnote, correction, addition, and that is that though with my wife, Lindy Huff, I founded North Atlantic Books a long time ago in the, I'm having to guess, in the mid-70s. It was taken over by the enemy in 2020 by people who did not share my viewpoint or honor the press's history. They had their own agenda, which is almost diametrically the opposite of my own. And so I was hired by Inner Traditions, who you're contacting me through, to bring my authors and lists there. And I've done so since then. And for the curation that you mentioned, I've done that for Inner Traditions the last 5 years under the name Sacred Planet Books.
And my listeners will know that when I find somebody who is well versed in a particular healing style, oftentimes I've got that contact because Richard has curated one of their books. I met John Friedlander. You remember we talked about the Seth history with him. I met him through Richard. I met Dr. Michael Shea through Richard, who is a craniosacral therapist. And I don't know how he does it, but he's an embryologist on top of everything and a Buddhist practitioner and. But Richard
Michael Shea is, right.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. But Richard has curated all these authors. And tell me more about this, Richard, because I'm going to tell you what I assume or interpret. You are very interested in bringing forth wisdom traditions that may not go inside the institution of mainstream medicine, but that are very effective.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like a bunch of things are happening simultaneously. One is I'm writing my own books, like Planet Medicine or the Homeopathy book. The second, but those don't make money. They're not a career. The second, but they are my kind of soul's plan or life purpose. Then the second is, as a job, I'm curating these books, as you say, and exploring and investigating all the kind of interstices of this world, of this alternative medical world. And then thirdly, as a kind of ethnographer and anthropologist, I'm exploring their cultural and historical origins and interconnections and how they are changing and interacting with each other through time. So those three kinds of um, activities, tasks come together in what you're referring to.
Mhm. Yes, I love that. There's a breadth and a depth of knowledge there, so I appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about homeopathy, and your newest revision talks about homeopathy as energy medicine. And for the listeners, this is a comprehensive primer, anything you want to know. It's in depth and on homeopathy. And as Richard said, he started writing about this as a 4-chapter article back in the 70s. So I wanted Richard on today to talk about this book because it's a phenomenal book. I'm late to the party. I didn't know all of the other versions. But so, Richard, you first talked about homeopathy a long time ago. And can you tell the listeners basically what that is?
Well, before I say that, what I'll say is that since I am not a homeopath myself and not a practitioner, my insights are really formed by my association for the first few versions with Dana Ullman, who is a practicing homeopath. And then for the last version, the one we're talking about by Vatsala Sperling, who's presently a very active homeopathic practitioner with a very large practice, and also the wife of the publisher of Inner Traditions. So um, the question as to what is homeopathy, I the odd thing is, I almost think that that's impossible to answer because we don't quite know what it is. It's um, it's a medicine, but is it a medicine since there's no medicine by conventional standards in the pills? So it's a form of transmitting energy through the medium of pills. The pills are given, and to call them pills is even a misnomer, but they're given based on matching the symptoms caused by the substance from which the pills are made in healthy people to cure the same in sick people. So it's like cures like. Instead of fighting the symptoms are enhanced in order to speed the healing of the condition, the illness, the condition, which is on many planes, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Then, secondly, of three, the homeopathic pills um, are diluted to the point where there is no physical substance left in the pills.
There is not a single molecule of the original medicine.
Right. So there's some sort of an imprint of it. Um, and whether that's being conducted by the pill, by telepathy, by some other form of energy, the um, the 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 pill, I don't know what else to call it for our purposes, the pill is essential, even though if analyzed chemically, it has nothing in it. And then the third thing is it's succussed or shaken according to a formula whereby decimals or hundreds are used. Oh, I'm pretty here's where my lack of being a homeopath comes in. I'm pretty inarticulate about this, but there, the pills are not just diluted, they're in some sense um, in a manner similar to in indigenous medicines, some sort of invocation of energy or spirit is conducted at each dilution. And in the book, I can remember doing this. I can't remember all the instances. I give examples of succussion in indigenous medicine, um, pounding with a rock. Uh, what are some of the others? I it's like my own exam for which I'm unprepared, but it's in the book, the
Mhm.
list of these indigenous versions. And I list them because I'm kind of seeking the broadest possible field for understanding how this works. And at the same time, the fact is it does work. People respond to homeopathy. And in the book, I speculate about what this might mean long term for our species on Earth, given that we face many problems of most immediately now climate, but also pollution and and they're all different forms of pollution, from plastics to other toxins. And if on a individual basis, problems, ailments can be cleared up by something which has no substance but transmits energy, is there not possibly such a form that could work on a global or collective basis? Which is quite the opposite of the direction things are going now, which is more towards artificial intelligence and kind of transhumanism,
Mhm.
transcending our humanity, um, and in a sense, trying to graft an artificial existence on us, um, which is the kind of antithesis of energy medicine. And in that sense, the book, my Inner Traditions book, is a book about energy medicine in general, of which homeopathy is one case. And my homeopathy is backed up by having Dana Ullman and Batsala Sperling um, contributing and checking each piece as I went along.
When you talk about there's an energetic residual effect in the absence of literally any molecule, it reminds me, and you tell me what you think of this, the work of Dr. Emoto and finding that something could be put in water and water could later hold that imprint.
I know.
Dimensions beyond.
Yeah, well, that's one of the explanations offered. Um, I edited a book last year at Inner Traditions by Ruslana Remennikova, um, in which she experiments with water in her own way and communicating with fish, using patterns in water, energy in water. Her book has to do with 12-stranded DNA and relating, developing a therapeutic relationship to your own DNA. And there are numerous people who have used different models to explore this same issue of the receptivity of water to patterning. And and water, I guess, is one of the key elements that transforms the earth, and makes it capable of having life forms on it. And we're substantially made of water, made of crystals.
Mhm. Well, sitting in mainstream medicine and when I had my day job, and coming to offer to people, I'll just do an aside here, offering to people a pain medication. And generally those are, um, they come with all kinds of problems. If you offer them high dose ibuprofen, you have stomach problems, kidney problems. Then you move to narcotics, and then you have addiction potential, constipation, nausea, the list goes on. But I struggled with some hand and wrist arthritis, and somebody pointed me to a topical pain relief cream that is arnica and 12 other homeopathic things, including some form of something related to snake venom. So with those 12 homeopathic ingredients, I knew there was literally nothing that nothing tangible that I could talk about in that. And it works.
Mhm.
And it works,
Uh,
really well.
it's better that it works than that you know how, if you had the choice. But oh yeah, what I was going to say was, I think you're aware that I posted a bunch of health freedom um, short essays, autobiographical essays on Substack, because
Yes.
I've been running this variety of things through Substack lately. In fact, after I get done with you, I have to interview someone myself, a high school friend, for the series I'm doing. But in those pieces, I've rarely gotten really sick, but our son came to visit in August and he had COVID without knowing it. And so both my wife and I got COVID, and I had an amazing stretch of going into the underworld and meeting these figures. Um, it was, I mean, it was horrible that it was COVID, but it was a series of really profound visions and interactions with um, entities that seemed real, and to have real wisdom. And I documented all that in the piece. And then when it turned into pneumonia, it was COVID in August, and then it turned into pneumonia. And I ended up for one day in the hospital in
Which
Bar.
is one day too many.
Yeah, and I discovered how horrible that was. I'd never been in a hospital before. And I panicked and I fled. I pulled the IV tubes out of my arms and I fled against their rules. They made me sign something before I left saying that I was taking responsibility, that I was probably going to die because I was
Right.
leaving.
Here, sign here that you know that we've told you you might die and you're choosing to leave anyway.
Yeah, and they they said that I had sepsis, which when I finally had a blood test done, I didn't. They had no way of knowing that. And I also was struck, although I guess this is pretty typical, by the fact that they wouldn't let me have any food that my wife brought, but would only serve me this horrible, sickening food that I would never eat under any circumstances.
Hospital food is horrible. Yes.
So, I,
If you don't ever have to go to the hospital, don't go. I was a hospital doctor for about 5 years, and yeah, you don't get anything green.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it's
the notion that you are there to get better, that it really takes it to the extreme that you're talking about. We've been watching well, we've been watching all of these Taylor Sheridan things on TV, and we finished Landsman and Lioness, so we're watching the older one, Yellowstone. And in the very part we're watching, the young woman, Native American woman, who's was unfortunately punched in the face, and is in terrible shape. Um, Her grandfather comes in and lights sage to help her, and they immediately drag him out of the hospital. Um, and that's a pretty good metaphor for the divide between the methods. Now, it turned out, I guess, that there was oxygen in the room, so lighting sage could have caused an explosion. But as he said, she got better from the little bit that he provided, at least so it seemed. In that sense, that's much like homeopathy. How can
Mhm.
you know what produces the improvement?
So back to homeopathy and our discussion of mainstream medicine, which definitely has its deficits. Although, if you're really sick and you need IV antibiotics and oxygen, and you're really sick, and don't have people at home who are going to be able to do sage or anything, you need to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
But if you don't have to go
We're
to,
taking that, but we're assuming that we're not leaving the modern world. We're on a computer, we drive cars, so we assume the equivalent is true. What we're talking about is more sort of chronic ailments and ailments that that not just submit to energy medicine, but in some sense are like chrysalises that contain the elements of their own cure. Um, I feel that about COVID, maybe not initially, but now I feel that people getting sick now, this is true. Um, but I don't want to. I don't. I can always go off on tangents, and I want to stick to your goal here.
well, let's bring it back to there is a divide. And, in mainstream medicine, oftentimes we are coming in with a hammer to swat a gnat. We are coming in guns blazing because we're going to eradicate, we're going to dominate, we're going to conquer, it's very in your face, most of the time. Homeopathy, as you teach in the book, is the law of similars. So rather than fighting and forcing the disease to go away, it's to me, it's saying, okay, react to this. And in doing so, bring your immune system in to restore the homeostasis. It's more of a cajoling to get back to where it used to be. Can you comment on that?
Um, well, it's again one of those things where um, what you say is using language
Mm-hmm.
to try to characterize a phenomenon that we don't fully understand. So that's pretty good language to create a context for what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I I'm not sure I have anything more to say about it except um, that pharmaceuticals and surgery, which are the two main things that standard medicine falls back on, um, are disruptors of homeostasis. And they throw things out of equilibrium, and the person afterwards generally is not healthier. They may be cured of the symptom, but they're not healthier. So the homeostasis is less, even though the symptoms may be relieved. So, in that sense, energy medicine is meant to use uh, homeostasis. I guess it's not completely irrelevant that homeopathy and homeostasis are kind of parallel constructions. They all energy medicines, acupuncture, various forms of osteopathy, and sound healing, color healing, all point towards, in one way or another, achieving a homeostasis between the person and the disease and the person and the environment.
When I started studying shamanism, I was so hungry for what constitutes true healing and how do I lead my patients to that, because I was so, it seemed like so empty oftentimes what I had to offer my patients. So 15, 20 years ago, I studied Peruvian shamanism. But what I've come to see, and you can speak to this if you would, there's this understanding that the body and the organism has the ability to heal itself. There is an original, I'll use my words, an original template that might have gotten off track, but if we can get it back on track, that's going to evolve and inform the future. And it's not about being broken, but just about being off track and getting back on track. It's very different than mainstream medicine makes the assumption with every disease process, every diagnosis we give somebody is that they're broken. And here's the medicine that's going to maybe help you get closer back to, but you're still broken.
Well, when you think about our original form, I mean, we're formed from single cells and develop um, embryogenically this whole organism that is functional. The process that makes that possible, the kind of homeostatic process that can take a blastula and form a whole organism out of it rather impeccably, like not just a human, but a lizard or a mouse or a tree, that
Now,
same.
that kind of wisdom and then communication between all the progeny cells
Mhm.
to end up where they're supposed to end up is unbelievably incredible.
And I think that, and you're indirectly and directly referring to this, that energy medicine and homeopathy implicitly try to spark the embryogenic aspect, the holistic aspect of the organism. And if it's capable of bringing single cells through to a whole functioning organism, then it's also capable of healing that organism more effectively than some sort of intrusive pharmaceutical substance.
So let's bring in my next favorite subject and tell me how you see any connections here. One of the things that I think happens in most forms of energy medicine, and certainly in the indigenous ways of healing, is a connection to the transcendent, a connection to spirit, to Irvin Laszlo calls it the universal information field, to this matrix, something that's exists, that has the plan, that has everything that transcends us. How do you see that playing a role with homeopathy?
Well, uh, I don't think we have to tie it to homeopathy up front. I think we can do that kind of secondarily. The really the bigger picture, and the question you're asking is, what are we? Um, and you point to what I always think of as the fundamental division in worldview. In one version, were simply mechanical objects that have developed from molecules interacting randomly over millions of years to produce these organisms in a sort of Darwinian fashion. And the other viewpoint is that um, a kind of spirit is descending into matter at the same time that matter is evolving into spirit, and they're coming together. So, um, in the transcendent worldview, and certainly you spoke to John Friedlander, you had a rather direct experience of somebody who lives that. In that transcendent worldview, we are manifesting through our these physical forms, but we have a prior form which transcends them. And that prior form is associated with words like karma and spirit and soul, soul's plan, and so forth. And at the at the and then, well, I'll try and skip over to homeopathy. Then, when you have a medicine like homeopathy, it implicitly addresses it addresses the part of oneself which is also non-material. So energy medicine or microdoses, nanodoses of substance also speaks to the the kind of um, role of spirit in matter. So
Mhm.
there's a parallel. I'm reminded of something interesting and striking, which has happened recently and has led me into a project at Inner Traditions. Um, it's an unfamiliar word, aports. An aport is an object which um, it disappears and reappears in another place. Um, and UFOs are essentially aports. They are disappearing and reappearing there. That fits what they are more than the idea that they're interplanetary spaceships. Um, this came to mind because, without getting into all the details, we have we have several iPods because we like them, even though they've been supplanted. And we actually each had one, but we were drawing off the same iTunes database. And my wife's one disappeared. We are living part-time in Portland and part-time in Bar Harbor in Maine. Her in mid, it was in mid October that her iPod disappeared in Portland, and we searched and searched for it, and we couldn't find it. So I ordered another one online, and it came, and then I gave it to her, and I just thought we'd never see it again, or it would just show up. And then at the end of October, we drove to Bar Harbor to vote because we were registered there. And it was sitting on the kitchen counter. It couldn't have been more blatant. And there was no wriggle room there. There was no way to say that something else had happened. It had been lost in one place and it reappeared another place. And I spoke to somebody who's been a friend and an author for a long time, named Dan Drayson, who sort of specializes in this topic and has made a movie about different types of aports. And I've recently gotten him together with Keith Thompson, who did a book for Inner Traditions that I worked with him on about UFOs called The UFO Paradox, to do a book linking aports to UFOs. And we we came back to Portland on December 1st, and she couldn't find the iPod had disappeared, and in its place was a strange object that wasn't ours, where it had been. It looked like some sort of light dimmer. but it didn't relate to anything in our house. So we left it there and we haven't been back there. And when we got to this house, which is 160 miles away, I just sort of looked for the iPod somewhat um, almost like jokingly, like, okay, manifest here if that's what you're going to do. And it didn't. So I forgot about it. And she had the other one anyway that we bought. And then about 2 weeks after we got there, I went upstairs to get her iPod to sync it, the new one, and the old one was sitting next to it. It had been lost in Portland and appeared in it had been lost in Bar Harbor and appeared in Portland after doing the reverse. Now I have friends who are very sympathetic to this topic who don't believe me. And I feel very much like somebody who's seen a UFO and then people don't believe them, only it's different. I I know that this happens, and I do consider that it's related to homeopathy. It's uh, an instance of the fact that non-physical energies are participating in our world. And if an iPod can move 160 miles, then a remedy with that has been reduced to having none of the original substance in it can also transmit a cure, or water, as in Dr. Emoto's case, can have an imprint on it. These are all kind of like signatures of the same realm which the modern world completely overlooks, and in a sense stands against. So although we have many, many problems in the world, you can just sit and count them, and I won't, because then eventually then you immediately get into political issues.
Then I'll
But
get depressed.
yeah, and you'll get depressed as well. But
But
there's
you know,
also
Richard, the
there's this
thing
whole
is,
non-material world.
Mhm. I was just going to say, I've talked to some people on my show who are deep meditators following the Yogananda tradition. And when you talk about consciousness manifesting into reality, there is literally these people who study it and know it and do it well, your ability to change reality. And then I think about the quantum physics. Is it a particle or is it a wave? So maybe it does become an A port.
Yeah, and when you talk to John Friedlander, no doubt this kind of thing came up, that that you can, in a sense, change your history too.
Mhm.
Um, it's complex, but it's doable. Um, and you could say, well, you don't really change your history, but you change forms that are not tied down to anything. And likewise with homeopathy, you change homeostases by by going at the part of them which is sort of invisible, invisible in a traditional sense.
Let's put in, and we for our last 10 minutes, put in thoughts you have about belief and intent. Because I think those are very powerful ways of holding your awareness that actually can shift reality.
Yeah, I feel as though my most recent demonstration of that was when I had COVID and went into this underworld of beings who demonstrated that to me and, in a sense, ran me through exercises with it. And rather remarkably, I don't pretend that I remembered all of it, but I remembered a large portion of it. And I think that that's in my posting on Substack. I think that's in my second post called Health Freedom.
Mhm.
I think I have 5 health freedom posts there. And the second one is called COVID. Um, and um, I don't think
Tell me the tenor of these
um,
uh,
that
beings.
they boy, this is hard. As a writer who kind of has as his main thing as a writer, making things that are really hard to describing things that are really hard to describe. I'm really thrown by how to describe this. Um, in one instance, for instance, they showed me this the best I can do that there was this string of jewels, only they weren't jewels, they were like lights, and they weren't on a string of matter. It was a string of energy,
Mhm.
and that each one was was a part of my spirit guidance, and that my job was to keep them as lit as possible. Um, and I thought that that took too much effort given how sick I was. And they pointed out, no, it took no effort at all. It only took intention. That if
Mhm.
I had the intention to keep them lit, and then periodically I'd look and it would seem as though some of them had gone out, and I got worried. And this voice said, no, look again. They're lit.
Mhm.
And they were, and that's what I call intent.
You know, in my spiritual community, a group that I've been with for, gosh, over 8 years now, that we meet monthly, meditate, we go to sacred sites and tap into the energies of the planets. One of the key things that our teacher, especially now when, and we won't devolve into the politics of the world, but especially now when consensual reality is up for grabs,
Mhm.
that it will is our job now to energetically keep our awareness, attention and intention linked to the life force. So that seems to me that you were given those, almost the VOR for an airplane landing. You were given those, putting your attention and intention to life force, calling that, I'll just use a little bit of woo woo words here, calling those energies to you, restoring your physical form with the life force available in the universe. And it seems like those were very powerful, transcendent beings that helped you.
Yeah, and that was one of maybe 4 or 5 that I remember. And I know there are others that I don't remember. I picked that one out because you mentioned intent.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I in my family, in my mother's family, my mother, brother, and sister all committed suicide. Um, my mother at age 55, my brother at age 57, and my sister at age 63. And that was a very dark energy to grow up with.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much the suicides as the dark energy that was there from the beginning, which
The
I
despair. Mm-hmm.
which I also think was in deeply in my mother, and that was communicated sort of before birth even.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's part of part of my life, it seems, has been to to transform that. And at the same time, only after my mother's suicide, which was when I was 30 and she was 55, so 50 years ago, basically, I found out she had had me by an affair. And I never met the man. He refused to meet me. I never met him. But neither my stepfather nor my legal father was my father. This jumble of things um, has very much almost presented a kind of bind that has to be gotten out of. It's sort of like presents the energy of transformation. And I very much have relied on that over time. I've fallen back on the fact that um, that I kind of was set up with all this. And so what have I done with it? I think you know, because I've mentioned it on some of my posts, that I'm trying to finish three books right now that I've been working on for decades. And one of them is about this whole thing that I published in an earlier version, but it's called Out of Babylon. And and
Well,
then
I'm struck by the blessing that Spirit gave you in the middle of this. Well, you have these biologic and familial imprints that are chasing you. But you have Spirit gave you a blessing in that half of your genetics has nothing to do with that clan of darkness.
right, and I don't even have to know I don't have to know much about the other clan. It's inside me. I don't
Mhm.
I used to think that I had to get out and meet as many people as I could who were related to my genetic father. He had four sons,
Mhm.
or my genetic half brothers, who I didn't even know about for a long time. And although I've met three of them, um, I I've kind of realized that it's irrelevant, that
Mhm.
it's what's inside me. After all the effort I put in to meet them, it doesn't add up to as important as it is just to recognize him inside me. And also, they are more, from the ones I've met, they are much more materialistic in their worldview than I am, which is, I'm not criticizing it, but they're all lawyers. Um,
Mhm.
and um, I feel as though I'm the only one of them who believes that our genetic father still exists as a soul or as a spirit.
Mhm.
So if he wants to connect to the world, even though we've never met, I'm the one child who um, believes in that he's still alive.
And in my shamanic training, we're taught that we can be the ones breaking the lineage of a pattern,
Hmm.
that we have that. So basically, I always I call it pay it backwards, because the healing we do breaks it, going backwards, breaks that energetic flow. So, and you've way gone beyond the life expectancy that clan would hold, haven't you?
Hmm. Yeah, and I've been thinking about the shamanic stuff recently. There's a woman here in Portland who I'm reconnecting with, who studied both with Michael Harner
Hmm.
and with the Four Winds group. Um, and um, and I knew Michael Harner and actually published one of his books.
Hmm.
So again, I feel I'm a little bit on the outside. I'm a little bit of an outsider to the tradition, but I also like curate, as you
Right.
said.
I like that. I like that you do. Well, we're going to finish up here. What would you like to share about homeopathy, about your curated books about the world for our listeners before we close?
Well, I think the easiest thing is to draw attention to my Substack postings because I keep up to date on those. And we've really discussed the homeopathy book, but these other books that I'll be bringing out before this comes out in June, um,
Mhm.
it, New Moon, Episodes in Disguise of a Marriage, and Out of Babylon. Hopefully they will be out by then, and so I'd like to call attention to them.
I love the people that you've either directly or indirectly pointed me towards because, excuse me, you have gathered a lot of friends, a lot of experts in different abilities. And I've learned so much. And so I thank you for that. Your wisdom is guiding me. So much
Thank you.
appreciation.
I think sometimes I'm a good judge of character until I'm not. So I have a really high batting average, but my misses are pretty awful. And
I know, but maybe we learn from those, huh?
yep.
Richard, thank you for joining us here today. We're going to close up. Richard Grossinger, he has literally written the Encyclopedia of Homeopathy, and with this new version, explaining it as we can look at it as energy medicine, homeopathy as energy medicine. And he has Substack articles. One is Joviage. Is that correct?
Yeah, I ended up using the name Jovian Bricolage for it
Okay.
because I was doing it with some other people and we were using Opera Jupiter, which they came up with. Ruslana was one of them, and they came up with this other title, and it turned out to be owned by somebody else. So I just played around and changed it.
Wonderful.
So look up Jovian Bricolage on Substack.
Thank you very much. We're going to close now, and thanks so much for joining me. You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.